The raw, undiluted shock still hadn't entirely dissipated even now, weeks later. It clung to me like a shroud, a cold, damp presence that whispered of betrayal in the quiet hours of the night. My daughter, Delilah, 28 years old, had disinvited me from her own wedding, banned, exiled, from an event I was, with a sickening irony, bankrolling. The words themselves felt alien, a configuration of syllables that belonged to someone else's life, some lurid daytime television drama, not mine. Gavin, 62, father of the bride, or rather father formerly of the bride to be seen at the altar. Sharing this, even anonymously on a forum, felt like lancing a boil. Painful, messy, but necessary. Perhaps laying out the sordid details, piece by painstaking piece, would allow some semblance of logic to emerge from the emotional wreckage. Delilah, my daughter. She'd always possessed a spirited temperament. That's the diplomatic term, isn't it? As a child, tantrums could erupt with volcanic force over the perceived injustice of a denied cookie or an early bedtime. As a teenager, sullen silences and door slams were her primary modes of communication. We'd navigated those years, Liliana and I. Liliana, my wife, Delilah's stepmother for the past 15 years, with a mixture of trepidation and a prayer for smoother waters ahead. Ups and downs, yes. Every parent-child relationship has its peaks and valleys. But this was a chasm, a gaping, unbridgeable void. She and Arthur had been together for about 3 years. Arthur. I'd had my reservations about him from the start. He was charming, almost excessively so, with an easy smile that never quite reached his eyes. He worked in financial consulting, a vague enough term to encompass anything and everything, and seemed to live comfortably despite no obvious, steady stream of substantial income. Delilah, a graphic designer with sporadic freelance gigs, was besotted. They weren't, as the saying goes, rolling in dough. More like occasionally bumping into it. So, when the wedding talk began, a grand affair they envisioned but clearly couldn't afford, I stepped in. "Let me handle the expenses," I'd said one Sunday dinner, a genuine offer born from a desire to see Delilah happy, to give them a stress-free start. Weddings are financial sinkholes. I knew that. Mine, to Delilah's mother, decades ago, had been a modest affair, and Liliana and I had opted for a quiet ceremony with close friends. But Delilah had always dreamed big. "It's my gift to you both," I'd added, catching Arthur's quick, assessing glance before his face smoothed into grateful appreciation. I wanted to show support, to be the magnanimous father. A part of me perhaps wanted to buy a little goodwill, a smoother path forward. Gratitude? A flicker would have been nice, an acknowledgement that this was a significant gesture. Instead, Delilah had merely nodded, a small, entitled smile playing on her lips. "Thanks, Dad, that's really helpful." Arthur, ever the smooth operator, had been more effusive, clasping my hand with a warmth that felt manufactured. "Gavin, you're a lifesaver. We can't thank you enough." His eyes, though, held that familiar, unreadable opacity. The initial planning stages were deceptively calm. Delilah and Arthur seemed to have a vision, mostly coordinated by a planner they'd hired. On my dime, of course. I tried to remain at a respectful distance, not wanting to be the overbearing father, but little things began to prickle. I remember one afternoon, Liliana and I were over at their cramped apartment. Delilah was scrolling endlessly through Pinterest boards on her laptop, a furrow in her brow. "Everything all right, sweetie?" Liliana asked, her voice gentle. Liliana always approached Delilah with a cautious tenderness, like handling a delicate, unpredictable bird. Delilah sighed dramatically. "The venue Arthur loves has a minimum guest count we're struggling to meet without inviting, like, his third cousins twice removed." Arthur, lounging on the sofa, chuckled. "It's a prestige venue, darling." "Worth a little stretch." "I was just thinking about the seating," I interjected, trying to be helpful. "Sometimes those heritage venues have odd chair configurations. Do you want me to look into renting some more uniform ones? Or perhaps some extra decorative pieces to fill out the space if the numbers are a bit low? I can cover it, no problem." Delilah didn't even look up. "It's fine, Dad. We've got it handled." The dismissal was curt. "Are you sure?" I pressed, a little surprised by her tone. "No trouble at all. Better to have too many options than too few." That's when Arthur leaned forward, placing a placating hand on Delilah's arm. "Gavin, that's incredibly thoughtful. But Delilah's got such a keen eye for these things. She and the planner are all over it. We wouldn't want to add to your plate." He smiled at me, that polished, impenetrable smile. Delilah, however, picked up on my perceived interference. Yeah, Dad, she snapped, finally glaring at me. We don't need you micromanaging everything, okay? We're adults. We can plan our own wedding. The word micromanaging stung. I was offering resources, not dictating choices. Hey, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. I'm just trying to make sure you have what you need. It's a significant expense, and I want it to be perfect for you. Arthur smoothly intervened again. And we appreciate that, Gavin. More than you know. Delilah's just a bit stressed. Aren't you, love? He squeezed her arm, and she gave a non-committal grunt, turning back to her laptop. I exchanged a look with Liliana. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I saw the flicker of concern in her eyes. These small, dismissive encounters began to accumulate, like grit in a well-oiled machine. Arthur was always there, a buffer and interpreter, often reframing my suggestions as well-intentioned but ultimately unnecessary, subtly reinforcing Delilah's perception of my interference. Weeks passed. The checks were signed, deposits paid. Florists, caterers, the ridiculously expensive venue Arthur had fallen in love with. I kept my distance, as requested, trusting Delilah and her planner. Then a thought occurred to me. My brother Louis. He and Delilah had always shared a special bond. He was her godfather, the fun uncle who'd spoiled her rotten as a child. Surely adding one more person, especially Louis, wouldn't be an issue. I called the wedding planner, a woman named Miss Albright, whose brisk efficiency had, until that point, been reassuring. Miss Albright, Gavin Maxwell here. Just a quick question. I'd like to add my brother, Louis Maxwell, to the guest list. I know it's a bit late, but he's very close to Delilah. A beat of silence on the other end. Not a comfortable one. Mr. Maxwell? She began, her voice suddenly strained. I'm afraid the guest list is finalized. And quite full. Full? I chuckled, disbelieving. It's a wedding, Miss Albright, not a lifeboat. Surely there's room for one more, especially family. Delilah and Arthur were very specific about the numbers, Mr. Maxwell. The venue has strict capacity limits for their chosen configuration. Her tone was clipped, almost defensive. Something felt off. Specific how? I pressed. Could you perhaps just send me the current list? Maybe I can spot someone who might not be able to make it, or we can shuffle things. I'm sure Delilah wouldn't mind for Uncle Louis. Another hesitation. I'll have to consult with Delilah on that, Mr. Maxwell. She approved the final list herself. Consult with Delilah about sending me, the person footing the bill, a copy of the guest list? My patience was fraying. Just send it, Miss Albright, please. Reluctantly, she agreed. The email arrived 20 minutes later. The subject line, DNA wedding, final guest list. My hand trembled slightly as I clicked it open. My breath hitched. I scrolled down, then up, then down again. My name wasn't there. Liliana's name wasn't there. My heart didn't just stop. It plummeted, a stone in icy water. It had to be a mistake, a colossal, egregious error. How could my own daughter, the recipient of this lavish five-figure gift, simply forget her father? And her stepmother, who had been nothing but kind to her? I snatched up the phone, my fingers fumbling with Miss Albright's number. Miss Albright, I said, my voice dangerously calm. There seems to be a rather significant oversight on this guest list. My wife Liliana and I are not on it. The silence on the other end was deafening this time. Then a small shaky sigh. Mr. Maxwell, this is incredibly awkward. Awkward? My voice rose. Awkward is spilling wine on the mother of the bride. This is something else entirely. Did Delilah forget to add us? Even as I said it, the naivety of the question mocked me. No, Mr. Maxwell. Miss Albright's voice was barely a whisper. Delilah and Arthur, they provided the finalized list with specific instructions. Specific instructions about what? Specific instructions that you and Mrs. Maxwell were not to be included. The world tilted. The blood roared in my ears. They what? And Mr. Maxwell, she continued, her voice gaining a sort of desperate momentum, as if rushing to get it all out. They also requested additional security at the venue, specifically to ensure no uninvited individuals could gain access. Uninvited individuals. That was me. Her father. I was speechless, physically unable to form words. The casual cruelty, the calculated exclusion was breathtaking. Proof, I finally choked out. I want to see these instructions. An email. Anything. This couldn't be real. Arthur wouldn't let her. Or would he? Miss Albright, probably eager to shift the burden, forwarded the email chain within minutes. There it was, in stark black and white, an email from Arthur's account, CCing Delilah. Miss Albright, please find attached the final guest list. As discussed, my fiancé and I require absolute adherence to this list. For clarity, Gavin and Liliana Maxwell are not to be invited, and we will require your firm's discretion in handling any inquiries from their side. Furthermore, please confirm arrangements for 2 additional security personnel at the main entrance, briefed to prevent any unauthorized access. It was co-signed electronically by Delilah. Absolutely. This is perfect, Artie. Thanks for handling. D. Weeks. They'd been planning this for weeks while I wrote checks, while I naively imagined her joy. The betrayal was a physical ache in my chest, sharp and debilitating. It wasn't just the exclusion, it was the premeditation, the cold, deliberate maneuvering. Arthur's smooth hand was all over this. He'd handled it. Why? The arguments? The times I hadn't sided with her when she was clearly wrong? The micromanaging? Were these transgressions so heinous they warranted this? I thought of all the years, her struggles in school, the terrifying phase with the wrong crowd, the discovery of those pills in her backpack when she was 16, a moment that had aged me a decade. I'd been there. Liliana had been there. We'd gotten her help, sat through tense therapy sessions, weathered her rage and accusations. And this was the thanks. This wasn't an oversight. This was a declaration of war. My own daughter, manipulated or not, had drawn a line in the sand, and I was firmly on the other side. The anger was a boiling tide, but beneath it, a profound seismic sadness threatened to pull me under. My next step wasn't clear. But one thing was, this was no longer about a wedding. This was about something rotten at the core of our relationship, something Arthur seemed to be cultivating. The silence in our home after I hung up with Miss E. Albright was thick enough to choke on. Liliana had watched my face drain of color, listened to my fragmented, furious explanation. She'd taken the printed emails from my trembling hands, her own expression hardening as she read. "Gavin," she said finally, her voice low and firm, "this isn't just Delilah. That man, Arthur, he's poison." I knew she was right. Arthur's fingerprints were all over this calculated cruelty. But Delilah had co-signed it. She had wielded the knife. Days bled into a week. I tried calling Delilah, straight to voicemail, each time. Her mailbox was, of course, full. She's busy, I told myself, a pathetic attempt at self-deception. Wedding preparations. But the forwarded emails from the planner were a constant screaming rebuttal. The confrontation, when it came, was inevitable. If she wouldn't come to me, I would go to her. I drove to their apartment, a knot of dread and fury tightening in my gut. What would I say? What could she possibly say? Delilah opened the door, and her expression was not one of surprise, but of wary expectation. Arthur loomed behind her in the dim hallway, a proprietary arm around her waist. His face was a mask of bland concern. "Dad," Delilah said, her voice flat, "what do you want?" Like I was a door-to-door salesman. "What do I want?" I fought to keep my voice even. "I want to know why I'm not invited to my own daughter's wedding. The wedding, I might add, that I am paying for." Delilah sighed, a long-suffering exhalation, and rolled her eyes. Arthur squeezed her shoulder. "We knew you'd find out eventually," she mumbled, glancing at Arthur for support. "Find out, Delilah. This isn't some trivial secret. You and Arthur," I glared at him, "have deliberately excluded me and Liliana. You've hired security to keep us out. Why?" My voice was shaking now, the tremor of rage and profound hurt. Arthur stepped forward slightly. "Gavin, perhaps this isn't the time or place. Delilah's under a lot of pressure." "Pressure?" I almost shouted. "I'll show you pressure." "I saved you the trouble of having to show up," Delilah said, her voice chillingly casual. "Honestly, Dad, it would have been awkward for everyone." "Awkward?" I gaped at her. "Yeah," she continued, a smirk playing on her lips, emboldened by Arthur's presence. "I'll send you some pictures, if I have time." That was it. The carefully constructed dam of my composure burst. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I roared, stepping closer. Arthur moved protectively in front of Delilah. "Now, Gavin, let's not escalate this," Arthur said, his voice a low warning. "Delilah has her reasons." "Oh, I'm sure she does," I spat. "Enlighten me, Delilah. What monumental sins have I committed?" And she did. Or rather, they did. A duet of grievances, a litany of my failings. I was never on her side. I always criticized her choices. Like Arthur, I thought bitterly. I'd flaunted Liliana in her face. Liliana, who had tried for 15 years to bridge the gap Delilah herself had created. She dredged up ancient history, a fight with a cousin where I hadn't blindly defended her, a poor grade in college I'd suggested she take responsibility for. And you always favored your new life, Delilah accused, her voice dripping with venom. Liliana this, Liliana that. You forgot you had a daughter. That's not true, Delilah! I cried, aghast. Liliana has been nothing but supportive of you, even when you've been... I trailed off, unable to voice the word impossible. Arthur chimed in, his tone deceptively reasonable. She feels abandoned, Gavin. When you remarried, it was a difficult adjustment for her. Perhaps your focus shifted naturally. My focus never shifted from loving my daughter, I insisted, my gaze pleading with Delilah. The pills, Delilah! When you were caught with those pills, who was there? Who got you help? Who sat with you through every goddamn counseling session? Was it Arthur? No, he wasn't even around then. It was me. And Liliana? Delilah flinched at the mention of the pills, a flicker of something shame in her eyes before it was quickly masked by renewed anger. You always throw that in my face. You loved playing the hero, the martyr dad. She's just saying, Arthur interjected smoothly, that your attempts to guide her often felt controlling, judgmental. She needed unconditional support, and she felt she wasn't getting it from you, especially after Liliana came into the picture. He made Liliana sound like a disease. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and shameful. What did I do that was so terrible, Delilah? So unforgivable? I was practically begging. Her face remained cold, implacable. You were never on my side, she repeated, as if it were a mantra. You chose Liliana. You didn't care about me. That's a lie, Delilah, and you know it. Is it? Arthur challenged softly. Perception is reality, Gavin. And Delilah perceives a long history of, let's call it, emotional neglect. The two of them, a united front, spewing rehearsed accusations. He was feeding her these lines, twisting her existing resentments into something monstrous. You only bring negativity into my life, Dad, Delilah said finally, her voice devoid of emotion. This wedding is a fresh start for me and Arthur, and frankly, your presence, and Liliana's, would just ruin it. So, you need to leave. You're not welcome. I stared at them, at the daughter I no longer recognized and the man who had evidently helped her become this stranger. Defeated, utterly, comprehensively defeated. I turned and walked away, their faces, hers cold and his smugly triumphant, burned into my memory. The drive home was a blur. Liliana was waiting, her anxiety palpable. I recounted the exchange, the venom, Arthur's insidious influence. He's manipulating her, Gavin, Liliana said, her voice trembling with anger. He's isolating her from everyone who truly cares about her. What does he gain from this? Control, I said, the realization dawning with sickening clarity. He gains total control over her. And maybe, I added, a darker thought surfacing, he thinks he'll have easier access to my money if I'm out of the picture, or if Delilah is entirely dependent on him. A few days passed in a haze of disbelief and simmering rage. The wedding was less than 2 weeks away. The deposits were non-refundable, tens of thousands of dollars. For a party I was barred from, with security hired to ensure my absence. Liliana found me staring out the window, the offending email still clutched in my hand. What are you going to do? She asked softly. I turned to her, a cold resolve solidifying within me. They want a wedding without me? Fine. But they won't have it on my dime. Gavin? No, Liliana, enough. This isn't about Delilah being difficult anymore. This is malicious. This is calculated. Arthur is pulling the strings, and Delilah is letting him. She said I bring negativity. Well, I'm about to withdraw a very large, positive financial contribution. Her eyes widened. Then a slow smile spread across her face. It's about damn time you drew a line, Gavin. If she doesn't respect you enough to want you there, she doesn't deserve a penny of your money. And he, she spat Arthur's name, can pay for his own damn prestige venue. The decision, once made, felt liberating. I picked up the phone and called Miss Albright. Miss Albright, Gavin Maxwell. Regarding the wedding of Delilah Maxwell and Arthur Vance. Yes, Mr. Maxwell? Her voice was wary. It's canceled. All of it. The venue, the caterers, the florist, everything. As the sole financier of this event, I am withdrawing all funding and canceling all arrangements effective immediately. Please inform all relevant vendors. There was a stunned silence. Mr. Maxwell, are you certain? The deposits are non-refundable. We're talking about a substantial loss. I am aware of the financial implications, Miss Albright. Consider it the cost of a very important lesson, for whom I'm not yet sure. But the wedding is off. Send me a confirmation of all cancellations. I hung up, a grim satisfaction settling in. Petty, perhaps. But it was more than that. It was about self-respect. It was about refusing to be a doormat, a walking ATM for a daughter who despised me and a fiancé who was clearly a predatory manipulator. The fallout was, predictably, volcanic. Miss Albright, true to her word, informed the venue and primary vendors. The first inkling I had of the explosion was a frantic call from the venue manager the next morning, demanding to know what was going on. I calmly reiterated my position. No funds, no wedding. He could take it up with Delilah and Arthur. Then came Delilah's calls. Dozens of them. Voicemails filled with screeching indignation, then tearful pleas, then more rage. I didn't answer. I blocked her number. That evening, as Liliana and I were having a quiet dinner, the first peaceful meal in weeks, the pounding started. On the front gate. Gavin, Dad, open this gate right now. You can't do this. Delilah's voice raw and hysterical. Liliana looked at me. Don't? I nodded. I'd already changed the gate code. We could hear her screaming, cursing, rattling the bars. Then Arthur's deeper voice, trying to placate her, then also yelling, Maxwell, you coward, face us. You've ruined everything. Ruined their plans, perhaps. But I was salvaging my sanity. Eventually, the shouting subsided, replaced by the sound of a car speeding away. My parents called a few days later. Delilah, naturally, had fed them her heavily edited version of events, painting herself as the tragic victim of a cruel, vindictive father. Gavin, how could you? My mother had lamented. To cancel her wedding, her special day. It's so harsh. She's your daughter. Mother, I said, my voice weary but firm. You don't know the full story. She and that leech Arthur banned me from the wedding. They hired security to keep me out, after I'd paid for everything. There was a stunned silence. Banned you? But why? Apparently I'm a negative influence, and Liliana is an embarrassment. Their words, not mine. Ask Delilah about the emails she and Arthur sent to the planner. Ask her about Arthur's role in all this. They didn't understand, not fully. They clung to the ideal of familial obligation, of turning the other cheek. But my cheek was bruised and bloodied. There was nothing left to turn. Months drifted by in a strange, muted quiet. The storm had passed, leaving an eerie calm and a landscape irrevocably altered. I heard nothing from Delilah. The silence was both a relief and a dull ache. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, an unknown number flashed on my phone. I almost ignored it. Hello? Gavin, it's Arthur. My blood ran cold. Arthur, what do you want? His voice was different. Gone was the smooth confidence. It was hesitant, strained. Can we meet? There's something I need to tell you. About Delilah. A trap? More manipulation? I don't think we have anything to discuss, Arthur. Please, Gavin, it's important. For her sake. And I owe you an apology. An apology? From Arthur? Curiosity and a deeply buried, treacherous sliver of concern for Delilah won out. We agreed to meet at a neutral coffee shop. He looked terrible, shadows under his eyes, a nervous tremor in his hands. He wasn't the polished predator I remembered. Thanks for coming, he mumbled, stirring his coffee with unnecessary vigor. You said you had something to tell me about Delilah, I prompted, keeping my tone cool. He took a deep breath. We separated about a month ago. I said nothing, waiting. It wasn't working. Delilah, she has some serious problems, Gavin. Problems you seem to encourage when it suited you. I couldn't help but retort. He flinched. You're right, and that's part of why I need to apologize. I was an idiot. Worse, I was a coward, and I was manipulative. This was unexpected. When we got together, he began, his voice low. Delilah was already prickly, resentful of you, of Liliana. I saw it, and instead of helping bridge that, I played into it. I wanted her all to myself, I guess. I thought if she was alienated from you, she'd be more dependent on me. A cold fury simmered inside me, but I let him continue. The wedding, the idea to exclude you, that was mostly me. I pushed for it. I convinced her it was the only way to have her perfect day, without your judgment or Liliana's presence making her uncomfortable. I drafted those emails. She went along with it because she was angry and I fanned those flames. I told her you'd try to control everything, that Liliana would try to upstage her. The confession was staggering. He had orchestrated my deepest wound. Why are you telling me this now, Arthur? Because after the wedding was canceled, she unraveled completely. Her anger, it wasn't just at you. It was at me, at the world. She became abusive, throwing things, screaming for hours. The littlest thing would set her off. I'd seen glimpses of it before, but I'd always managed to redirect it, often towards you. But with you out of the picture as a target, it all came at me. So her anger issues weren't entirely his fabrication, but he'd certainly exploited and exacerbated them. She needs help, Gavin, real professional help. She refused to get it while we were together. She said I was the problem. But it's more than that. She's deeply unhappy, and she makes everyone around her miserable. She drove away all her friends. She has no one. And you're telling me this because I feel responsible for making things worse with you, for isolating her, and because despite everything, his voice cracked, I did care about her once. And maybe you're the only one who can get through to her. Or at least try to get her to see a therapist. He looked down at his hands. She blames me for the separation, of course. Says I abandoned her. She's been calling me nonstop, begging, then threatening. He sounded like a man genuinely at his wit's end. A puppet master who'd lost control of his puppet and was now terrified of it. Villain he was, but perhaps a repentant one, or simply one trying to offload a burden. She accused you of flaunting Liliana, I said, remembering Delilah's words. Said she was ashamed of her. Arthur winced. I might have put that idea in her head. Suggested that people would judge, that Liliana didn't fit the image. It was cruel. I was trying to make Delilah feel like we were the sophisticated couple, and you and Liliana were less so. It was about my own insecurities, making myself feel bigger by diminishing others. His confession was a torrent of self-recrimination, but it didn't lessen the damage he'd done. He wasn't just a villain, he was a petty, insecure one who had used my daughter's vulnerabilities as a weapon. I appreciate your honesty, Arthur. Late as it is, I said, my voice flat. But Delilah made her choices too. She's an adult. I know. I thought you should know the truth, what I did. And that she's really struggling. She's alone. He looked up, a flicker of his old manipulative charm surfacing. Maybe if she knew you knew about my part in it, maybe she'd be willing to listen to you. A desperate attempt to shift responsibility, even now. I left that coffee shop with a bitter taste in my mouth. Arthur, the architect of so much pain, now trying to absolve himself by throwing Delilah under the bus he'd helped build. Yet a sliver of his words, she's alone, resonated with that stubborn, vestigial part of me that was still a father. Against my better judgment, against Liliana's gentle warnings. Gavin, she'll only hurt you again. He's just trying to make you clean up his mess. I went to see Delilah. Her apartment was a mess. Takeout containers, clothes strewn about. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her eyes hollow, her hair matted. The moment she saw me, the fragile hope I'd harbored shattered. What do you want? She snarled, her voice raspy. Delilah, Arthur called me. He told me some things about his role in the wedding. Arthur? Her eyes narrowed. That bastard. He ruined my life. He abandoned me. Delilah, he said you're struggling. I came because I'm worried. I want to help you get some support. Therapy, maybe? It was like throwing a match on gasoline. Therapy? She shrieked, her voice escalating into a full-blown tirade. You think I need therapy? You're the one who's sick. You and that whore you married. The venom directed at Liliana was shocking in its intensity. Don't you dare talk about Liliana like that! Oh, I'll talk about her however I want, she screamed, spittle flying. I hate her! I've always hated her. She stole you from me. I was ashamed to have her at my wedding, ashamed people would see her as my stepmother. She's a gold-digging tramp who ruined our family. Each word was a hammer blow. She was pacing now, a caged animal. You always took her side. You let her poison you against me. Everything that's gone wrong in my life is because of you. You ruined my wedding! You sided with Arthur against me, didn't you? He probably fed you a pack of lies to make himself look good. I tried to speak, to reason, but it was impossible. She was a whirlwind of rage, dredging up every perceived slight from the past 20 years, twisting every memory into a testament to my failings. She blamed me for her failed relationships, her career struggles, her current misery. Arthur was just a symptom. I was the disease. I stood there, taking it, the years of her bitterness washing over me in a toxic flood. There was no reaching her, no logic, no empathy, just a bottomless well of blame. Finally, I raised my hands. Okay, Delilah, okay. My voice was quiet, drained. I tried. I really did. But I can't do this anymore. I turned to leave. Yeah, run away, she shrieked after me. That's what you always do. Run back to your precious Liliana. I hope you're both miserable. I walked out slowly, deliberately, without looking back. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I just left. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to give. The part of me that had hoped, that had ached for reconciliation, finally withered and died in that squalid, hate-filled apartment. This time, the line I drew was indelible, carved in stone. 2 years. 2 years of blessed, uninterrupted silence. I rebuilt. Liliana and I found a new rhythm, a quieter peace. The ghost of Delilah still haunted the edges of my thoughts sometimes, but the pain had dulled to a scar, a reminder of a battle lost, a child surrendered not to fate, but to her own demons, demons so skillfully exploited by a man like Arthur. I learned he'd moved on quickly, already engaged to someone else, someone new to charm and presumably to control. Whenever family or old acquaintances gingerly brought up Delilah's name, a whispered rumor, a hesitant question, I would cut them off, politely but firmly. I'd rather not talk about that. No explanations, no justifications. I owed no one anything more. I slept through the night. The constant tension that had coiled in my stomach for years had finally unspooled. Then a few days ago, my mother called. Her voice was softer than usual, tinged with a caution that immediately put me on alert. Gavin, she began, I thought you should know. It's Delilah. I waited, my heart a steady, even beat. No lurch, no sudden dread, just a clinical stillness. She's in a mental health facility, dear. Has been for a few weeks. Apparently she had a very public breakdown. I pictured it. The screaming, the accusations, the self-immolation. It was the inevitable destination on the path she'd been treading. She's not doing well, Gavin, my mother continued, her voice thick with unshed tears. They say she's struggling, deeply depressed, very agitated. She's been asking about family. A pause. Arthur, of course, wants nothing to do with her. No surprise there. Silence stretched between us. I knew what was coming. Do you think, my mother faltered, do you think you'll go see her, Gavin? She's your daughter, after all. Maybe now. Maybe she's ready to accept help. I looked out the window at the calm, sun-dappled garden Liliana and I had cultivated, a place of peace, of quiet growth. I paused, not out of indecision but to gather the words, to make them clear, unequivocal. No, Mother, I said, my voice gentle but absolute. No, I won't. Another silence, this one heavier, laden with her disappointment, her uncomprehending sorrow. But I didn't fill it. I had spent a lifetime filling silences, rushing in to soothe, to fix, to absorb the blows. No more. I don't say this with residual anger or a desire for vengeance. Arthur's villainy, Delilah's choices, they are part of a tragic tapestry. I tried. Lord, how I tried. I extended my hand, my heart, my resources again and again, only to have them slapped away, spat upon, or manipulated by those who saw kindness as weakness. There's a point where trying becomes an act of self-destruction, where continuing to engage is simply feeding the dysfunction. For me, that point was reached long ago in a doorway filled with hatred, a decision reinforced by a villain's hollow confession. My peace is too hard won, too precious to sacrifice on an altar of misplaced obligation. Some chasms, I've learned, are meant to remain unbridged.